Yeah, nothing ever popped up here. Since you're live. Yep. The only thing I'm not seeing now is I'm not hearing audio, so let's just double check those settings.
You shouldn't be hearing it
Actually.
right here, unless you're sitting maybe.
Well, I've got the mic open. Check, 1, 2. Oh, I got it.
You got it now?
Yep.
Thank you. I think I figured it out on my.
No, it was all me. Check, 1, 2. Feedback line in my mixer.
Well, good evening and welcome to this town hall event hosted by the Johnson County Post in partnership with Johnson County Library. Thanks for all of you coming out on a Tuesday evening. I'm Kyle Palmer, editor of the Post, moderator for tonight's event about phones in schools. We've convened educators, parents, students, and a mental health expert to talk about what local districts are doing to deal with student phone use in schools, discuss whether those approaches are working and what, if anything more, needs to be done. But before that, a real quick plug for the Post. If you already know about us, or even better, if you are a subscriber, we thank you for your support. It is that support which allows us to put on events like this, of course, as well as our candidate forums coming up this summer and fall. If you're not currently a subscriber but are interested in Johnson County news and supporting a local media organization, you can try us out. We have a special trial where you get 1 month for just $1. If you like it, you can continue at full price. That's $7 a month after that. You can find out more at johnsoncountypost.com/subscription. Also on your way out, you can catch the QR code on this sign on the way out if you want to try us out again for $1. I will say we're real people covering real news in Johnson County. Nearly our entire staff is either from Johnson County or now lives here. Some of us are homeowners in Johnson County. Our kids go to school here. We ourselves, some of us went to school here as well. We use the parks, we pay the taxes, we go out to eat, we check out library books and return them on time. So give us a try. We promise to do our best to cover this community we call home to the best of our abilities. That goes for the people watching on the live stream as well. So now to the topic at hand tonight, phones in schools. Well, phones are a pervasive, unavoidable part of everyday life. Many of us in this room tonight, adults and adolescents alike, probably spend more time on our phones than we would like. But phones are still an integral, many would say largely beneficial, part of modern society. We communicate with them. We stay in touch with loved ones with them. We do business. We order food. We bank. We play games. We buy stuff. We read the news, all on our phones. So given their ubiquity and their necessity to our current world, then what would be phones, or what should be phones' place in schools? Johnson County school districts, like many other districts around the country in recent years, have been trying to answer that question, adjusting their policies, implementing new rules for how and when students can use their personal electronic devices during the school day, not just phones, but also tablets, smartwatches, and earbuds. On one hand, there seems to be a growing momentum for completely banning phones during the school day. This is one of the key recommendations of the popular new book by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation. Raise your hand if you've read that or heard of it. Okay. It advocates not only for no phones in school, but also for families to delay giving their kids their own devices until high school. Some states, including California, Florida, and Virginia, have passed statewide laws requiring schools to either ban or limit in schools. In Kansas, the State Board of Education late last year recommended that school districts adopt so-called bell-to-bell policies in which students should have their personal devices stowed and locked away out of sight for the school day. Well, there has been some pushback to these stricter initiatives, some critics suggesting that worries over phones amount to a moral panic. It could eventually be viewed in hindsight as ridiculous as efforts in the 1980s to ban beepers in schools. If you don't know what a beeper is, just ask your parents. Researchers from the University of South Florida, for instance, recently surveyed some 1,500 11 to 13-year-olds in that state, and one of their main findings, in fact, was that students who had their own smartphones generally reported greater mental well-being, were generally, quote, healthier and better adjusted, end quote, than students who did not have their own smartphones. And students with their own phones were also, maybe counterintuitively, more likely to get together in person and less likely to be cyberbullied than their peers without their own phones. So suffice to say, you'll be able to find the research and data that backs up your case depending on which side of this debate you fall. But tonight we want to talk about how this is playing out in Johnson County schools. How do parents and educators up here, as well as most importantly probably, the students feel about their phones and their impact on learning? So we're going to hear from all of them tonight. So a note about logistics. We're going to have two separate panels. First, right now we have up here tonight a couple of educators and a couple of parents. We will be able to give them a chance to talk about their experiences in schools, and then after that we'll do a quick changeover and hear from some students as well as the director from the Johnson County Mental Health Center, Tim DeWeese. So we'll have a kind of moderated conversation for 20, 25 minutes or so, and then open it up for questions. There's a couple of options if you're interested in questions, submitting questions. You saw index cards on your chairs. You can write them down if you're uncomfortable speaking, but we also do have a microphone. So when we get to the point where we're ready for questions and you want to raise your hand, we can have someone come around and give you a microphone and ask directly of these people up here or the panel that follows direct questions. Or again, you can write your questions down, and then our staff members will collect them and bring them up to me, and we can get through those questions as well. So either write them down or you can say them as well, whatever you're more comfortable with. Well, so with that being said, let's introduce our first panel up here, and we'll start from your left to right. I'll just introduce you briefly and then kind of start throwing some questions at you. So immediately to my left first is Kim Whitman. She's co-founder of the nonprofit Phone Free Schools movement. She's also a parent of 2 teenagers in the Shawnee Mission School District. So Kim, welcome very much. We also have Don Branham at the same table as Kim. He's a literacy instructor at California Trail Middle School in the Olathe School District. At the next table is Jill Johnson. She's president of the Shawnee Mission KNEA and a teacher at Shawnee Mission East High School. And at the end of the line is Chris Huff. He's a parent of an elementary school aged kid in Shawnee Mission. So we have all different levels, high school, middle school, elementary school, represented up here. And so we'll start with the teachers first. So maybe Jill, maybe you'll start with this one. So I'll say this, all 6 Johnson County school districts in the last year or so have instituted new rules for phones in schools. Generally follow the same outline. I'm not going to go through all the different rules, but basically all 6 school districts require that students have their phones put away during instructional time. That can vary from age level. There's some more freedoms in high school. But I will say Shawnee Mission is maybe the latest one to do it. I think it was just earlier this year. So what's your assessment of how these policies or these rules, how they're working so far in Shawnee Mission?
Thanks for that question. As a teacher at Shawnee Mission East, I can share what is happening in my own classroom and then just a few things I've heard in the hallways from other staff. I started this school year kind of anticipating this was going to happen. I also serve on I was part of the steering committee for the strategic plan for Shawnee Mission, and so I decided I have freshmen this year in geometry, and so I decided day one to put up a kind of a cell phone caddy, if you will, on the back of the door of a closet that I have. And so they each have a number, and they put their cell phones in there for the duration of class, and then when it's over, they take them back. And it's worked well for me throughout this school year. I know that other staff, and myself included, in the past have had to speak to kids multiple times. Please put away your cell phone. Please put it in your backpack. Please whatnot. And so having a spot for it in the classroom has helped out a lot. I also know that many staff have appreciated the fact that there is now a policy to look to and subsequent consequences for students that do not comply. And so they do feel like they have support from their administrators to address the issue if the students continue to have their.
So maybe before it was a little bit more class by class, teacher by teacher, kind of up to the teacher to enforce their own rules, and maybe didn't feel like you had the administrative backing or imprimatur to do it.
It's not perfect. Kids are still on their cell phones during class. At times, kids are still on their cell phones in the hallways at times.
Which is allowed, we should, I mean,
between classes, but I mean if they leave the classroom to go to the bathroom, they're supposed to leave it in the classroom, not take it with them. It's a work in progress, but I think it's a good first step.
Yeah, Don, middle school, so a different age level in Olathe. I think it's as well as some other districts, the policies are a little stricter, not supposed to have them out at all, including passing periods, including at lunch at your school, California Trail, correct?
Yes, that's true. Students are supposed to keep them either in their pocket or their backpack or their locker between 8:20 and 3:20, which is instructional time. In this day and age, hardly anybody uses a locker anymore. So I think most students keep them in their backpacks. Some students do keep them in their pockets. And I would say overall in my school, and I think my colleagues in our other schools have found it to be a very successful policy, and we've had great cooperation from our kids. For example, last semester I had lunch duty, and I thought, my gosh, we're going to have 200 students in there with 4 teachers. We're going to be outnumbered 50-1. But we've really had almost no issues during lunch with students using their phones during lunch, which you would think would be a free, unstructured time when they could use them. That's more of a high school thing, but we've had very little trouble with that at all. And then in the classroom, I don't have an exact number, but I'm thinking maybe I've had to ask kids turn over their cell phone to me 10 or 12 times this year since we started the policy back in August.
And contrast that to before. What were you doing before? What was the behavior like in class? And how often were you feeling like you had to address the phone issue in class?
Prior to this year, we didn't have a district-wide policy. I think if individual teachers or groups of teachers, like a team of teachers, or a particular school wanted to basically ban phones, they could do that. But we didn't generally have that kind of value in my building. So I tried to have shared control with students over that. Hey, if you're going to look at your phone, make sure your work is done for this class and all of your other classes too. And my rule of thumb is whatever you're looking at or you're doing on your phone, make sure you'd be comfortable sitting around a table with me and your parents or maybe your grandparents and sharing that with us. But it was a difficult way to deal with it because it was almost impossible to be consistent with kids, because if I asked one student to put it away and get to work, they'd say, well, what about that other student over there? that's got the phone out. And as soon as, I'm dealing with one student that's got a phone out, sure, another student will take one out. And also, I wouldn't say this in front of the kids, but it's like, hey, look, you have a lot of work you need to do in all of your classes. You're looking at your phone. That student over there that's looking at his phone has no missing assignments and straight A's. But that's a difficult thing to expect out of a middle school student, where they see it as, hey, why does that other student get to look at a phone, or why are you getting after me? And then somebody else takes out their phone back over there. So I'm very much appreciative that our school board adopted this policy this year, and it's been very successful.
I want to jump to Kim, again, co-founder of the Phone Free School Movement. It says it so in the title of the organization, Phone Free. So I'm imagining that the policies currently in place that both Jill and Don are describing as successful compared to what maybe they used to see in class, still for you, not going far enough. So explain to me what is the thrust of Phone Free Schools, and how you think maybe policies in local schools as well as beyond Johnson County could be going further.
Thank you, Kyle. So as Kyle said, I was one of the original co-founders of the Phone Free Schools movement. And in 2023, we spent an entire year talking to dozens of administrators and teachers across the nation. We sussed out what was working, what wasn't working, how they were successful and how they weren't. And from that, we created what we call the Phone Free Schools Administrator Toolkit. And it's a roadmap on how to implement a bell-to-bell policy, which is from first bell to last bell, where the phones, AirPods, smartwatches, all devices, personal devices, are locked away for the day, the entire day. So the policies in Johnson County aren't locked away. There's no storage tool. And at the high school level, they're not bell-to-bell. Kids can use the phones during passing periods and lunch. So we consider that a weak policy. A strong policy would be bell-to-bell in order to get the best results, in order to take it off the teachers' plates. And so we found that 3 things are key. That rock-solid policy is number 1. And number 2 is transparent and continuous communication. So you don't just roll out a policy. You spend a month or 2 meeting with the stakeholders, talking about what's going on in the classroom, things like cyberbullying and privacy violations, just the social media drama, so parents understand the problems, and then also those stakeholders can ask questions and really get comfortable with the policy. The third is consistent enforcement, which is why it is so important to lock the phones away. We know that these products are addictive, right? They're designed to grab our attention, and it's really hard for adults to control that urge to check their phone in their pocket. I mean, how many of you, raise your hand if you've been in a conversation with someone and they have pulled out their phone when you were talking to them, right? Or if you were in a meeting and you felt your phone buzz and you pull out your phone. And so here we are expecting children whose brains aren't developed to have that control. And we need to remember what school is about, right? It's about not only academics during the class time, but also creating that sense of community and the socializing that they get in between time. So that's why it's bell to bell.
I do want to hear from Chris Huff, too. You are a father of a younger son, elementary school age son. Full disclosure as well, your son goes to the same elementary school as my 2 sons. Phones in schools in elementary level are potentially less of an issue. I mean, just some numbers here. So Pew Research Center did a survey of teachers in 2022 showing that 72% of high school teachers felt cell phones were a major distraction. That stands to reason. We just heard from Jill. 33% of middle school teachers said it was a major distraction, but only 6% of elementary school teachers. So maybe it's not an issue directly impacting your son's education yet, but I'm curious to know, are you talking to your son at home about personal technology? How are you preparing him for middle and high school where it will become maybe more of an issue, getting him used to it? What's your approach right now as a parent?
Sure. So I'd first say you're spot on. I have a first grader, and his most interesting thing is to tell me about trading rocks with his friends. So I think cell phones are a little far away from his interest. But as it pertains to the personal part, with my son, my wife and I are very firm believers in allowing our kid to have some unstructured time that allows him to explore his interests. And much like his father, he seems to be trending towards perhaps the more geeky or nerdy topics, and technology is of an interest to him. And so our approach really has been to that he understands that he does have limits of what he can do, and he has things he has to do first, whether it be cleaning his room or helping with whatever chores. He can explore his interest guided with technology. He's primarily interested in Minecraft. But most importantly, he has to know that there are, he has to listen and, when we're done, we're done. And if we push the boundaries too much or if we try to skirt the guidelines, that there come consequences. And that has worked very well for us. He likes to watch some shows on TV. He likes to play Minecraft, but when we ask him to stop or go play outside with his friends, we do meet, I would say, normal amounts of pushback you might expect from a kid that age, but by and large, he does it. And so that approach to me is allowing him to understand that he's got to be able to govern his use of what he's doing. Right? I don't think it even goes to technology. It goes more to just a general everything in moderation, or it's understanding that I can't do this one thing I want to do all the time whenever I want.
Yeah, and do you, again, elementary school age, so maybe not quite into that realm yet where it's a day-to-day concern, especially one at school, but do you support the idea of having a bell-to-bell policy at the schools that your son is going to be going to?
Yeah, so I think what I would say is that I attended the board meetings recently that Shawnee Mission School District did about the policies that they were going to put out, which they aligned more or less what I think what the rest of the districts here in town are doing, and I like it. I like it because it's a graduated approach, right? You take your youngest kids and you give them pretty firm guidelines, bell to bell, for lack of a better term here at the moment, because that's the kind of structure they need. But then I think as they grow, and granted, I do have a first grader, so I'm only this much into the parenting, but from friends I've talked to, right, you've got to give your kid a chance to develop and learn and have freedom to make mistakes and have them be governed while they're still with you at home, so that they're not being thrust into the real world, having been controlled for 18 years of their life, and then suddenly have no other boundaries other than ones pushed on them.
And I'm going to come back to Don and Jill too, but Kim, just real fast, what is the difference in your mind between what we're seeing in Johnson County now, these school districts where there's more restrictions than there used to be, but still kids can get to them and use them at certain periods of the day, and a more the kind of policy you described where they come in, they put it in a lock pouch or a locker before the day, they don't see it until the end of the day. What are the effects in your mind on learning between those two different approaches?
Well, engagement and focus improves drastically not only in the classroom, but in the in-between times. And so grades go up. Teachers feel like they're teaching and not policing phones, so teacher retention improves. So the engagement, and a lot of administrators say the lunchrooms are really loud again, and that's because kids are engaging with each other. So there's multiple benefits of having it locked away for the day.
And for the teachers, Jill or Don, I don't know, either one of you can start to take this, but do you see a stricter, again, bell-to-bell policy being something that is feasible in your district, something that you would want to see? Or are you both appeared pretty content with how things were right now based on the new rules that were instituted in the last year in your districts? Maybe, Jill, you start with this one.
Yeah, I do know at the middle school level, I know I'm a high school teacher, but I speak with a lot of middle school staff. They do somewhat have a bell-to-bell policy because they are requiring them to keep it in a locker. And so what I'll share is I've heard from staff in those buildings that they have seen less, lack of a better term, fights, I guess, or disagreements with kids, because I think some of those were being started through text and social media. And with the cell phones and lockers, there's less of that. So I think that's been fantastic for our middle schoolers. For high school, it's working in my class. I know that there's several other staff members that still have to tell the kids to put them away repeatedly. But I do know that if they were to get to the consequence of having to write them up, the administration said they would back them on it. I know that they still take them with them to the bathroom, and the hall monitors, we have some staff that monitor the hall, still see them, with their phones in the hallway, and they're now responsible to tell them to put it away. And so that creates some chaos. I think it could be feasible. I'm worried about the cost of something like that. If we were to need to purchase something that they would put the phone into, so that would worry me. I know several students utilize it to communicate with coaches or other people on their teams, or other activities they're in, to know is the schedule changing for the, the game? Do I need to go pick up my younger sister from school because my parents can't? Like different things like that. That might happen if they're a high school student that has more responsibilities at their home. So I like the way it is right now. I think that our staff need to make sure that we're consistent with it, but I think that it can be very successful.
Yeah, Don, from the middle school level, again, they're supposed to have it stowed away, locked away. You're not supposed to see it but they presumably have it either in their pockets or in their backpack. So still, you might have a student kind of draw it out at some point or bring it out underneath his desk or her desk. Do you believe it's working right now in your school? I mean, you did say that earlier, that it is working. So again, the idea that maybe get a little bit stricter with it, go bell to bell, maybe get lockers, phone caddies, these lockable bags that Kim was describing. What do you think about that?
Well, I was able to get some information about that, about if it's successful, and my principal ran some numbers for me. I guess for some background, we have an online system where we can enter information about behavioral issues just for information, including if a student is using a phone in class. What we should do is take the phone, send it to the office. They pick it up on the way out at the end of the day, and we make a little note of that. So for students that are repeatedly using their phones in class and it gets reported, our administrators will enact further consequences. And what they explained to me was, and I think all 10 of our Olathe Middle School administrative staffs are doing a similar thing, and that is, if it gets to that point, they will have students drop off their phone in the office and they arrive in the morning and pick it up on the way out for 10 days. And out of 586 students, we've had 7 students where they had to initiate that second level of beyond just taking it for the day, because we've seen a pattern of behavior where a student is taking a phone out during class, the teacher has to take it away and send it to the office. So a total of 7 parents were contacted about that, and a total of 3 were put on that 10-day contract. I think contacting the parents saying, look, if this continues and your son or daughter keeps using phone in class, then we'll put them on this 10-day contract where they drop off the phone and pick it up. And I think by contacting 7 parents, 4 of those parents intervened and their kids saw the light that they shouldn't be taking their phone out in class. And 3 of them were still a little misguided and needed to have their phone restricted for the 10 days, which represents 0.5% of our kids. And out of those 3, only 1 has had to go through the 10-day process twice so far this year.
So it's not, from your mind, success, then?
That sounds like
yeah,
success.
Yeah.
And my principal said that if you were to look at the data for our other 9 middle schools, it would be very similar, and they've initiated similar sets of consequences, like having them turn it in for 10 days at the office.
Kim, can you respond to the idea that, A, like, what's this going to cost? Is this going to cost more money that we don't necessarily need to be spending if maybe this is the status quo? And then 2, also, I think the point that Jill brought up about older kids especially needing to communicate either with friends, sports teams, parents. Respond to both of those, maybe, if you
I
would.
would love to. So our national team just hosted a webinar called Phone-Free Schools on a Budget. It was to show that there are methods you can use that don't cost an arm and a leg. There are affordable ways to store phones. Some examples, in Dayton, Ohio, they use manila envelopes that are in milk crates, and they're labeled by grade and then by student name. So when the student enters the building, they slip their phone in. And those crates get stored in a locked closet off the main office. So at the end of the day, they put those crates back out, and they can pick up their phone from that padded envelope. This principal said in the 2 years she's been doing that system, she's spent, I think it was $1,700 total for all the materials. So Yonder is the most expensive option. It's a neoprene lockable pouch. It's $30 a student. So you don't have to go to that degree. You could also use pencil pouches that they put their phone and other devices in and then drop them in a basket, and that basket gets stored in the office again. So if kids are leaving during the day, it's best or most convenient if the phones are in the main office so they can stop by the office and pick up their phone. So there are very affordable methods. I will say that to the second question, I've talked to teachers in Shawnee Mission in Olathe and in Blue Valley in the last week, and they said that their impression of the policy is very different from the administrator's impression. I know in Shawnee Mission, they allow, depending on the building, 3, 4, 5 warnings per class, per kid. So technically, a student could get 3 warnings every period of the day and never get sent to the office. So there's all this elaborate warning system that's cumbersome for them and they don't want to deal with. So again, on a strong policy, there's no warnings. The phone goes away. The distraction goes away. And I want to back up and say schools didn't create this problem, but they're having to deal with it, right? We as parents created it. We're giving our kids phones at younger and younger ages. Social media companies and the platforms are designed to be addictive, like we talked about. So we're creating this problem, and it's going to take more than just schools to solve it. It will take all of us.
Going back down to Chris, I mean, you seem to suggest that your son right now, again, a younger student, has pretty healthy boundaries on his technology, his screen time. From what I heard you say earlier, doesn't have his own phone yet, and he's only in first grade.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. What's your plan for that? Do you have a plan for that?
Well, I just want to say that my wife promised me she wasn't going to come to this event, and it appears she snuck in, so now I've got to be extra careful as to what I say. But I would say that my wife and I actually, if anything, will probably delay as long as we can, but it's going to be really dependent on who he is as a person, right? And how the things that we've been doing with him to date, when that time comes, have helped him understand how to regulate himself.
Yeah. Beyond... Well, as a parent, let me ask this. What curriculum or teaching about technology do you want to see in schools? I mean, Kim said schools didn't create this problem. They are having to deal with it. So schools are going to have to, I guess in a manner, teach technology hygiene. How much of that is your job and how much of that is school's job, in your opinion?
Sure. So I actually want to push back on that point a little bit. I mean, I was in school in the 90s. When there were no personal technology fundamentally in schools, but I can guarantee you that I witnessed many, many distractions happening in the classroom. And so while I'm not currently in the classroom, I have a little bit of skepticism with the idea that we suddenly have a distraction problem. I'd love to hear if the teachers up here who are actually in the classroom have something to say there. But to the second part of your question, which is what kind of curriculum would I like to see for my kid? Well, technology, barring some pretty drastic things, isn't going to go away. So in the schools, I would like to see the policy allow the teachers to use technology effectively to teach our children, but also not hinder what they need to do with the kids to teach them what they need to know. So I really actually look to folks like Jill to tell me what it is they want, right? And when I went to the board meetings about this, both the educators and the administrators seem to indicate that, realistically speaking, particularly at the high school level, the policy that they have put in is what they most effectively can enforce.
Yep. Just a note on distraction. So I did have read about Common Sense Media. They did a survey of some 200 teenagers in 2023, tracking their phone usage, found that the median number of alerts that the participating teens received per day was 273. That's the median. A quarter of those participating teens also, 1/5 of the teens in the study received more than 500 alerts per day. At least a quarter of those coming during the school day. Is there a difference in kind in the distraction that smartphones cause? This is for the teachers, Jill and Don. Is there a difference in kind that the distractions the smartphone cause, as opposed to maybe what had come before that maybe you had seen, as Chris alluded to? Are
Sure.
smartphones different?
I started teaching in Shawnee Mission in 2007, which is the year that the iPhone came out. So just share that there. But they didn't all have them at that time. So sure, there were lots of other distractions, talking to the person next to you, wanting to be the class clown, what's going on outside my window, lots of different things. I would say the number you shared doesn't surprise me, the number of alerts. It's a constant thing that as soon as it lights up, you want to look at it and you get distracted. And I did want to kind of touch on what Kim was sharing about how a student could have their cell phone out, get 3 warnings in each class period. and not have a consequence. That's not per day. We've been told that if the next day they have it out again, that's the fourth, and you, by your fourth and fifth, are writing them up. However, that again is on the teacher. So then the teacher has to be the one to keep track of it and then follow through and write them up and get help. And now I've kind of forgotten what you were talking about.
Distraction.
There you go.
Distraction. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a different type of a distraction for sure. And I think we know that from research that, I mean, don't you get, is it called dopamine when you get to stare at that screen and the blue light comes on? And so I think it's a different type of distraction because it's more addictive than the reaction you get from being saying a funny joke or being a class clown. So.
Donna, I won't date you unless you want to, but you have been teaching since before the iPhone became
Before
a thing.
2007, yeah.
Okay.
12 years.
So you have experienced classrooms and schools before smartphones and now after smartphones. Is there a difference in the type and quality of distraction that smartphones pose as opposed to previous things, or is it quantified in terms of just the type of challenge it's been for you as a teacher historically?
Well, I would say that a smartphone by nature, first of all, we as teachers don't want to see kids doing this when they should be interacting with their peers and having conversations in real life, whether it's about what we're learning in the classroom or just other topics. And another problem with smartphones would be we have a responsibility as teachers and as administrators to not have students accessing content that is not acceptable for a classroom, and they can easily do that with a smartphone. And we have a responsibility as teachers and principals and people that run schools to protect kids from cyberbullying, which would take place over group conversations or text over a cellular network. So, yeah, there have always been distractions, but those distractions have been in real life, and they're fairly easy to deal with as a teacher because it's right there in front of you. But when you have things that are kind of under the radar distractions, like kids, again, that might be accessing unacceptable material for a classroom or sending unacceptable messages or cyberbullying or something like that, then we have a whole new level of complexity to deal with that we really can't control because everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket. And like Kim said, social media by design is meant to be addictive and to lure people in. And again, we have a responsibility as the teachers and the administrators and the people in charge of the kids during the day to not expose them to that sort of thing. Yeah, you could say, well, it's the parents' responsibility. They're giving them the phone and things like that. But once they come into the classroom, then it becomes the school's responsibility. And, you know, to further that, if there's a controversy that's happening on their own time in the evenings and weekends that spills over into the classroom, then it becomes our problem as well. So I would say that smartphones offer a distraction or a problem that is far beyond anything that I could say we would see in real life in a classroom, short of, you know, somebody having a weapon or, heaven forbid, something like that.
A couple of you have brought up the idea of cyberbullying, how that is tied into the use of smartphones, how it can be exacerbated. I want to ask the two parents about their thoughts on that. I will also just say, audience members, if you do have a question, Leah has the microphone, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions up here, but then if you have a question to ask one of these two teachers or two parents, just raise your hand. Leah can come find you, and then she can cue you up to ask a question after they're done. But I'll throw the question to Kim about cyberbullying. How does it play out in schools? How do you think a bell-to-bell ban would help address that angle of this story?
I've had conversations with administrators that have said once they've put in a bell-to-bell policy, discipline referrals fell from 75% to 25%. Like it's a drastic change when it comes to that bell-to-bell not having access. Cyberbullying, excuse me, falls that much. And some of the other stats that I wanted to share that Kyle alluded to a study, 97% of students use phones during the school day. On average, the average high schooler uses it 1 hour, 6 minutes. That's a study that just came out in February. So 1 hour and 6 minutes during school, they're on their phone. It's usually social media, YouTube, and gaming. A third of teens report being exposed to pornography during the school day. 35% of teens admit to using their phone to cheat. So that's another advantage of not having the phone there, and 65%, to your distraction point, 65% of students report they are distracted by devices. So they're admitting, over half, 65% say they're distracted, and 72% of high school teachers say phone distraction is a major problem.
Yep. The teachers, real fast, do you think that your current policies kind of address these concerns, inappropriate content, cyberbullying, the constant distractions?
I would say for the middle school, yes. Like I said, what I'd heard from middle school teachers is at a building that had more often in the past than now, they had students deciding to meet up during class to fight, to other things. It's not happening almost at all because they don't have their cell phones. So I think that has helped. You mentioned the cheating part, and yes, in the past I have had to kind of catch a student with their cell phone out using photo math. If you don't know what that is, you take a picture of a math problem and it tells you how to do it. And so, yeah, I know, right? And so with the phones up, like in my classroom, them being in a caddy, I don't have to worry about that because they don't have their cell phone to use to cheat. So I think it is helping with that. But again, we don't have a bell-to-bell, but in my classroom, because of the way I have them put them up during the whole entire class time, it has helped with that tremendously.
Yep. Chris, beyond their own personal devices, pretty much all students in Johnson County, once they reach upper elementary or secondary grades, are given their own school-issued device, typically a Chromebook or a tablet. So banning phones, to be clear, is not banning one-to-one technology in the schoolhouse. Would that fact take the teeth out of a bell-to-bell policy? I sense a little bit more skepticism on your part about a bell-to-bell policy. So do you think the technology in the schools as it is now, that's enough? And what are your thoughts on the technology use in schools that your son's going to be going to?
So I would say that I've been doing a lot of looking at this subject since I got interested in it, and I think I would say there's two parts here, right? There's the personal technology part, and some of the latest studies that came out of the UK recently, where they studied a bunch of schools that had differing levels of policy here, suggested that there wasn't really a statistical difference about how personal technology in schools modified the kids' emotional or mental problems, or behaviors, I should say. So that makes me a little skeptical about the limits of what we can do by trying to push it as far as we can in the school, right? The second thing is, and I have some educator friends, and I know I'm sure Jill and them fight this, but the technology in schools from the school-provided devices provides a lot of avenues that also need governance, right, for the kids to, to be mindful of what kids are doing, right? And so I would say, actually, I'm a technology professional, and I don't speak for my employer in this regard, but I would say that it is nigh impossible for you to realistically control your child on technology. They will find a way to do what they want to do. So my approach and my thought, again, I only have a first grader, but is rather than trying to put strict controls on our children, is how do we best support them to navigate the world they're going to be in?
Yeah, finish your thought, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so rather than try to block them or control them, how do we best support them to navigate the world they exist in now so that they can make smart decisions for themselves?
I believe we do have a question from the audience.
Thank you. Hi. I have two questions. One is, in the recommendations for policies on personal devices, what is everyone's experience with special needs and special education students? Because you probably, I don't know if you see them as teachers in your particular areas, or if you have experience, maybe you don't. Both our kids are special ed kids, and technology was important for them for a lot of different reasons. So I'm curious on the thoughts there. And then secondarily is sort of touching on what you're sharing, which is for all the problems we're talking about trying to solve, the distraction, the mental strain, the various other difficulties that are real that come from these personal devices, having school devices all day long. I I guess I'm wondering why the policy focus is so heavily on the personal device and not at all on the school-issued
So
devices.
two questions there, maybe Don or Jill first addressing the question about special ed and how special ed students are wrapped up into this, and then maybe we'll throw the second question to Kim. So Jill, it looks like you want to respond.
Yeah, this particular school year, I don't actually have special education students in my classes. I have for the other 17 years of my teaching career, but I know that I think several students find a calming, helps a calming environment with music playing in their headphones. And so I'm not sure the answer to that, but I assume that they would work with their case manager and the families to figure out what to do if they felt the need to listen to music, to help them regulate in some way. As far as the policy only being about personal devices and not the ones that they are issued, I believe, and you probably know, because you're on the technology team possibly, the strategic plan does have one of the strategies around technology, and it was shared with us from students on the strategic planning steering committee that they had classes where they would use their computers almost exclusively. So everything would be posted on Canvas, which is what we use to post things. They could do the entire assignment on Canvas. They could essentially do everything online. So if they were absent from school, they could still get an A in their classes. And so that kind of was an alarm. So we're like, okay, well, we need a strategy to address that. How do we utilize the technology in the classroom the best way? I will share, as a math teacher, most of the time their computers are in their backpacks. We have the books and things that I project on my screen, but rarely are we actually utilizing the computer for instruction.
And the question to Kim about, and Chris talked about it earlier, but there's phones, that's one thing, but now there's one-to-one technology in nearly all schools, at least in middle and high school. So would that fact take the teeth out of a bell-to-bell policy, the fact that they're still on screens most of the day? Maybe not every class, as Jill said, but most of the day.
Can I first address that in the best practice definition, there are two exceptions. One is for an IEP and the other is for a 504. So if personal devices are needed, those are absolutely allowed for those exceptions. Second, school-issued devices, yes, are a problem. But the thought is, let's get the devices, the personal devices, out of the classroom first, because the school can't control those. They don't have a content filter. They don't, as Jill and others were saying, they can be exposed. Maybe it was Dawn saying they can be exposed to material, and they have no control over it. So the first step is getting rid of the phones. And I have heard, once bell-to-bell policies are in place, some of that traffic will occur on the school-issued devices, right? Unfortunately, Shawnee Mission allows the chat function on the devices, so they chat there, right? So there are ways, I know other districts who have turned off all those functions. So there are ways to control, to eliminate or at least cut down, but I think phones is the first step.
Mm-hmm. Another question? And this is Leah Wonkum, our deputy editor.
Hi. I'm sorry, I have a frog in my throat. I have one parent from the Shawnee Mission School District. Wow, I really can't talk. Asking one question. This is for Kim Whitman, but anybody on the panel is welcome to answer. Some parents tell me their student suffers from anxiety and they need to be able to have their phone to reach their parent at all times. How do parents adjust to bell-to-bell policy?
This is a great question. Anxiety comes up a lot. I think I go to what the experts say. We've talked to psychologists, psychotherapists that have said that having continual communication with your child actually creates more anxiety. And schools, the school day is a safe environment for students to develop independent skills and learn to manage. And if we take that away from them, and every time they have a concern at school, they can call mom or text mom and say, I got a bad grade, what do I do? And they never learn those skills, critical thinking skills, and develop the independence they need, then they're not going to be successful. So there are ways to address true anxiety without giving providing this tether to their parents.
Yeah, we do have another audience question. I did want to just throw to Don, since I haven't heard from you for a bit, but you've taught for a while. Do kids seem more anxious than they have in the past?
If they are more anxious, I don't see it outwardly. I don't know if I could quantify that, but we have had students in the past when they could, not officially, but they could contact their parents anytime with their phone. There were a lot of kids that would contact mom or dad many times throughout the day, wanting to get out of school or just wanting reassurance or something like that. So maybe not having personal devices available for their use is a good step in helping to foster that independence that they need.
A question from the audience?
Hi, so I had a question. So I guess we talked about school kids, and there's a huge age range there. So my question is mostly for the juniors and seniors, kids we are preparing to send to college. So, with this policy, I mean, part of the reason we want this policy is behavior change. We want these kids to be able to go to college and not be on their phones, even in college. So I guess the question, when you talk about implementation of a policy, stakeholder involvement is important. So is there room for involving some kids or a panel of kids in these policies? These are almost adults. Some of them are adults. And the problems we talked about kids, it's not just for the kids. I mean, adults have the problem too. Cell phones, social media, they have problems for all age ranges, I guess.
So at Shawnee Mission, students were on the committees that helped develop these policies. They did hear from students. I'm a firm believer that it's important to understand and hear from students and what they're experiencing. However, I'm also a firm believer that they don't help set the drinking age, the voting age, any of those other rules and regulations. And so, of course, they want their phones, right? They're addicted or are dependent on them. And so I don't believe that students should get a voice in making the rules. They don't make other rules, so why would they make rules around phones?
And Jill and Chris, Jill, you're a teacher. Chris, I believe you were involved on the technology team that did eventually have input on the rules in place now. So maybe also just answer that question, student involvement, student agency in terms of setting these rules.
So actually, if I want to first respond to what I just heard, I would actually ask anybody in the room if they believe that the drinking age policy that exists materially influences what happens with children, or is it the way you parent your children and how you interact with them? Would be the first comment. Second bit, my bit with the technology committee as it went with the SMSD policy was not so much about personal devices, such as it was more about the technology policy and what we could do to strengthen and formalize how we could use it better in the school, so with the devices the school provided. So I don't have a personal technology.
We have a
for
couple
you.
more questions here, and we are getting kind of close to time where we want to hear from the students next, so we'll hear this audience question first.
So I don't have a question, I have a comment. I've been subbing in Olathe and DeSoto since 2008. And this has been by far the hardest year because of the phone policy. It has turned us into phone cops and made us have adversarial relationships with the students. The phone pockets or caddies would solve everything. And I walk into a room, and if there's one, it's just like it makes my day. And I've told the teacher, I said, I don't care what the subject is, if you have a phone pocket, I'll sub for you anytime, because it just solves everything. And the kids, I love the whole thing that you have, but a good compromise would be to have required phone caddies with assigned numbers. It just takes the issue completely away. And then they can have them, they're not supposed to take them to the bathroom, but they can have them at lunch, they can have them at passing periods. But in the classroom, I've had kids say, I said, boy, it doesn't even seem like it's a rule anymore. And they go, it's really not. And yeah. I had one school where it's very open, it's glass, a lot of the rooms are glass, and I had hall duty, and I was walking through the halls, and every single class I walked by, the kids were on their phones. Yeah. And even when a teacher was up front.
Can I address that, Kyle? Do you mind?
Well, really quickly, we do have another question up here, which Leah will come around, but I do want to get the teachers first to respond directly to that, and then Kim can chime in. But Don, you teach in Olathe. Are there differences in how teachers are still enforcing it, correct? So maybe some teachers are, you would say, more lax, maybe struggling with the rules a little bit more?
Well, I would ask, are you experiencing that conflict at high school level, middle school? High school. Yeah. And again, I believe our high school policy is they can use them during passing periods and during their long lunch break and before and after school.
On their desk. The rule is they have them in their backpack, but they
Yeah.
don't have them on their desk, so it's impossible for them not to use them.
Yeah, do you, I mean, Jill or Don,
I
do you
wouldn't
hear-
want to have
yeah.
to live under that policy.
Do you
as
hear
a
from
teacher
colleagues
personally.
that are saying, you know, this is still not enough, or I still struggle with this, kids are still having them out, I still can't get kids to put them away?
If the staff member is intentionally asking them to put them away and then following through with a write-up, I'm not hearing that much. I'm more hearing from staff that see them in the hallway still during passing and wondering why they have them in the hallway and who's going to help enforce that. I think staff, knowing that they're going to have to constantly be watching all the kids, that has started to weigh on them. I'll share that we implemented this policy in February, in the middle of the school year, where we hadn't had it before. I know it's because our school board wanted to have it as soon as possible, but that made it difficult when you had one set of rules and then you switched in February to a new set of rules. I think it's easier with the freshmen in high school when they first come in to start day one. I think having those juniors and seniors when they were used to 3 other years of using their phone whenever they wanted to, suddenly switching was difficult.
Yep. And I know Kim wanted to say something. We have one more audience question.
I truly believe teaching is the hardest job on the planet. I don't envy any teacher. I am grateful for all of you that have the passion to teach our children. And I applaud those of you, Jill, that use the phone caddy. That's what I would do if I was in the classroom. But we have to remember that school isn't just about academics. So it might make the teacher's life easier if their phones are in the caddies during class, but we're forgetting about it's also a unique time when students are together, hundreds of students are together for 7 hours a day, and that's where they develop their sense of belonging, their friendships, their community, and other skills. So the in-between times, the passing periods and the lunch are essential for that. So it might make the teacher's life easier to use the phone caddies, but it's not necessarily what's best for students' development.
And one final question for this portion of the event.
Well, I guess mine is kind of a general question. Is there any real debate about this in a serious way? The reason I ask is I've looked at multiple studies on this. I cannot find a single study that has ever said that having phones available improves academic performance. And I ran across this one that was really interesting. It's called Brain Drain. The mere presence of one's own smartphone reduces available cognitive capacity. And what they did was they had kids with cell phones and they made them, put them face down on the desk, turned off. And what they found was that having that phone on the desk turned off reduced their academic performance. So is there even a question about
It
that?
actually
I think I
didn't
know what-
reduce it much.
Yeah.
The real difference was when it was in a different room. It barely made a difference when it was turned off on the desk or in the bag. It has to be removed for you to have that brain capacity.
I mean,
back.
is there a debate? Is there a response to that? Chris, you have expressed some skepticism.
Yeah, I think I would say that the Anxious Generation has become a book that is championed by a lot of people. But if you look at some of the professionals who are actually experts in this specific subject, Candace Ogden is one, where she basically really cautions people to suggest that the studies that used in the book at best show correlation, but not causation. And that if we do not pay attention to what the data is actually saying, we run the risk of targeting the wrong things about what actually our students need. And the second thing I would say is additionally, professionals who are specifically focused on the subject wrote a book called Behind the Screen. I can't tell you their names without looking it up, but look up Behind the Screen, and what they basically advocate for is having conversations with your children about what they need to support them in their existence in the world. And the academics backed up the studies, and that they conducted a 3-year study of their own that suggested very different results than what I think some of the more popular fear-based marketing books are suggesting.
Well, we're going to leave this portion of the event here. I want to give a big round of applause to Chris, Jill, Don, and Kim. The students have been waiting patiently. Let's do a quick change out. If you can put the microphones down. We'll put the placeholder up on the live stream, but please, if you're in the room, don't get up, don't leave, because we're going to have some students come up here and tell us their experiences, along with Tim DeWeese from the Johnson County Mental Health Center. Just give us a couple of minutes to change over.
takes 2 seconds to turn these on, so just turn them on a little bit ahead of time before you talk. Sweet. So if you feel like you're not gonna it takes 2 seconds to turn on. Cool. If you're not gonna be talking for a while.
All right, we're ready to start the second half of our Phones in Schools panel event. We're going to hear from some students as well as Johnson County Mental Health. So I want to introduce the people up here now. Again, facing the stage from left to right, immediately to my left, Avni Bansal, a sophomore at Shawnee Mission East High School. Thank you so much for being here, Avni. At the same table as her, Evan Haas, a senior at Shawnee Mission South High School. At the next table, Asher Boyer, a senior at Gardner Edgerton High School. And at the very end, not a student, as he said to me coming up here, Tim DeWeese, director of the Johnson County Mental Health Center. Thank you so much. So we're going to hear some experiences that students have had, as well as maybe talk more generally about the effect that phones have on your lives, both education-wise and outside of school. So let's start with the students first. Describe your typical day with your phone. How much do you use it? What apps do you use? Maybe tell on yourself a little bit if you want, but you can pick up those microphones as Sergey explained, and maybe Avni, seems like you want to start.
Do you mean like with the phone policy or before it?
Well, you've had phone policies in place now at Shawnee Mission now for a couple of months, so yeah, maybe just explain it with the phone policy and compare it to what it was before for you.
So with the phone policy, it's at Shawnee Mission East. We got it this semester, so we haven't had it for very long yet. But in most of my classes, I do put my phone in the phone caddy that we were talking about, and I do think that's a really effective way to deal with the problem, because before it, people were definitely on their phones, like during each class, during free time, even during instruction, which was rude to the teachers and like also for ourselves, because I mean, personally, I do get distracted really easily, and I was guilty of being on my phone during class time. So this has given me something to follow, which it's actually helped me personally, and me and my classmates were talking about it. And we think that we actually have been focusing a lot better and have been getting more stuff done during class. So I do think that the way the phone policy is right now is working so far. And I am on my phone during passing periods and lunchtime, but I'm not on it at all during class anymore, and it actually does feel a lot better for me personally. So I think that the way it's going right now is really good, but we just have to continue to see how the phone policy continues to like be for students and just see how it affects students in general.
Evan, your experiences at Shawnee Mission South, again, the policy has been in place at the same amount as Avni, just a couple of months. How's it been for you?
I think at my school, I have to start this by saying I take a lot of AP and honors classes, so I see a lot more students who want to be there and want to be learning and are less inclined to be on their phones hypothetically. I haven't seen that so much in practice as you would expect. A lot of even the AP and honors kids will be on their phones during class. But after the phone policy, I see a lot less of that when there's like actual instructional time and more of that when there's free time and work time, and teachers are more inclined to be lenient because we're more likely to keep up on our grades, right?
So it sounds like there's still phones coming out, students kind of glancing at their phones, being on their phones even during class when theoretically when they're not supposed to be.
Right. As a senior, I have all of my teachers have kind of had the same thought that we're seniors, we're about to graduate, they don't want to enforce this for 4 months and then drop us into the real world where nobody will be enforcing this.
Asher, at Gardner Edgerton High School, I believe it went into effect at the beginning of the year. I think you were on the principal's advisory council that kind of crafted the rules or at least gave advice. before it was put in place. So how's that gone in Gardner-Edgerton?
Well, there was a little pushback at first. We had a panel of students. I wasn't on it that year, but they worked hard to try to make it fair for the kids, and they compromised a lot with the storage stuff and even like if it was allowed during passing period or not. In my experience, it's been okay. I don't use my phone a lot typically, but I've seen way less usage now. But there's still your offenders every now and then. I would say it's been successful though, for the most part.
And why do you say successful?
I like they said before, a lot more interaction in the classroom now. Teachers seem like they actually are enjoying their jobs a little bit more because there's less, disciplinary action that needs to take place.
For the three of you, how much do you use your phone on a daily basis, both in and out of school? How much of it is it a part of your life? Maybe give me a typical day.
We're allowed to use it during passing period and at lunch. So, I listen to music. I don't get a lot of notifications typically, but that's pretty much it. My sports, I talk to my coaches on it, but like other than that, yeah.
And outside of school?
Just my parents, occasional apps to chat with my friends, but other than that, no, not really much usage from me at least. I might be an outlier.
I'm not sure how common you are. Yeah. Evan and Avni, what's your phone use like outside of school?
I almost never use my phone during school, with the exception of recording interviews for journalism.
You are in journalism class. So
I am in a
clarify that,
journalism
yeah.
class, and we do use our phones to record interviews so that we can get accurate quotes.
Yes, well, a very good exception, I would say, yes. Avni.
Yeah. So in school, I honestly did use it quite a bit before the policy, but now I've actually realized that it actually does really help when I'm not on it. So during school, I haven't been on it at all really with the phone policy, but during passing periods I have been. At lunch I don't really go on it just because I'm usually just talking with my friends and none of us are really on our phones. But then at home I honestly am on it quite a bit because I'm texting my friends and also scheduling interviews because I'm also on journalism and doing other stuff on my phone, which is a problem. So honestly, I feel like I do have more control over it at school than at home because I still struggle with using my phone a little bit too much at home.
You mean in control, you mean mentally, self-control.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Tim DeWeese for the Johnson County Mental Health Center. How often do issues related to phones, also intrinsically tied up with social media, how often do those conversations and issues come up when you're talking with kids and counseling kids at the Johnson County Mental Health Center?
It's constant. It's a definite issue. When I think, I talk a lot to the public, and I often get asked kind of, what's my experience from a mental health center standpoint, and I typically share the top 10 things that keep me up at night. Underage drinking, suicide rate, deaths due to fentanyl, poisoning or overdose, bullying, eating disorders, image issues for both girls and boys, and inevitably, untethered technology is an agitator. Phones are an agitator to all of those things. So to say that those things are worse today than they were, technology has created that. And I think while there are all these beautiful things about what technology can do, we just need to be aware and have discussions about the unintended consequences that those things bring, because it's definitely agitates all the social problems that have been out there for a number of years.
Let me ask this: do you feel like phone use, social media too, does that, as Tim said, agitate some negative feelings that you may have? Does it make things worse at times? Does it pose a challenge? I'm curious to know. Asher.
Obviously, there's a lot of negative stuff you can find online. I have unfortunately run into stuff like that. Sometimes you see something you don't want to see. The algorithm's not perfect. You'll see some weird stuff. But for me, it's been a pretty safe environment. I had pretty good restrictions on my stuff when I was younger. But
your parents, you mean, growing up, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what did they do? I'm sure some other parents would be curious to know.
Microsoft has family features where they can monitor your account and stuff, but it's going to happen eventually. If you're on the internet, you're going to see something you don't like. Someone's going to post something. It's going to slip through the cracks of the safe search stuff, and it's It's safer than I would say like it used to be, but you'll still see stuff. That's
And so what
negative.
apps do you use?
Social media, pretty much just TikTok, maybe YouTube every now and then. And I mean, you won't see anything crazy, but sometimes you'll see like, I don't know, like something like a crime scene, or like, I don't know, like where there was a shooting and you'd like, I don't know, something just like you might not want to see, that like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that.
Evan, Avni, what are your experiences using social media? How does it impact your outlook, your mindset, your feelings?
I'm not a big user of social media. I have Discord, which is sort of a gaming chat app, and I use that mostly to talk with my friends who make video games and a couple of friends I've come acquainted with online. I don't use TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, any of the other things. I use
I'm glad
YouTube
I got some representative
sometimes.
teenagers up here tonight. Yeah. Well, we talked before this, and as much as you're comfortable sharing, you have gone through periods where you were using your phone more. It sounds like you've dialed that back a little bit. Maybe the phone policy at school helped that in some regards, but could you just explain a little bit of that evolution on your part?
I think the phone policy at school has had very little to do actually with how much I use my phone. My evolution of phone use was mostly during coming back to school after COVID. I had spent a lot of time online during COVID, and I had spent a lot of time on my phone. And so coming back to in-person classes and seeing my classmates and seeing my teachers helped me realize, like, oh, I need to be in the real world more.
And so how has that changed for you? How much do you use social media now? How much do you use your phone now? And how have you been able to kind of maintain that?
A lot of the things that I realized were contributing to sort of my low mental health and my high phone use, I've cut out of my life. There are a lot of online communities I was a part of that I cut out. I cut down on my YouTube use. I used to use Reddit, and I deleted that from my phone because it was a major problem for me.
Avni, do you feel pressure? Do you feel negativity that's related to things that you see online, things that you see on social media, things that the other kids are sharing or posting about?
Well, I don't have TikTok, but I have Snapchat and Instagram, which I do use a lot. And on Snapchat, there's like private stories that a bunch of people have, and like all of my friends have them, and I do too. So it's basically like you talk a lot about like what you're like thinking and like your day, and you just post it on a story with only a few of your friends. And so honestly with that, there is a lot of like negativity just because it's like going behind people's backs and talking about stuff. So I think that is like one of the biggest problems with social media, just like talking about other people without them knowing it and just like building up that negativity. So I do think that's a problem, and the phone rule in schools will help that in schools, but it's still like kind of inevitable to avoid outside of schools. Like I'm not sure how that would be avoided outside of schools, but.
Well, it sounds like the three of you have done a fairly good job of kind of cordoning yourself off, at least mentally, from these stressors or these pressures. Do you feel like that? Do you feel like you've been able to insulate yourself, if that's the right term, from some of this negativity?
I mean, for me, I feel like it did used to affect me a lot more in middle school and stuff when I was younger, but now I feel like me and a lot of the people in my school have just like grown up as a whole, and I've been taking harder classes, so I'm more focused on that aspect of it instead of just the social part. But I think that it is still a struggle, and I don't know, it's pretty difficult, but I think if you just focus on other things and realize like personally that the social media aspect isn't as important, then that really helps.
Yeah, Ash, you look like you were about ready to say something.
Yeah, it's now. Don't get me wrong. You can still find stuff if you try, and you don't want to find stuff. But I like a lot of the fights at my school last year before we had the policy. Primarily, were like stuff that was posted online that caused disputes between students. And without the phone in the school, it's a lot. I mean, I don't know the statistics, but I'm pretty sure we've had less incidents.
And that's a direct response, you think, of being able to use your phones less in school?
I would say, yeah. And now there's still like conduct or whatever, but that's mainly because of like upsetness from the phone policy.
Yeah.
Now,
are these the types of things you hear at the Johnson County Mental Health Center, Tim, that phone use, social media, sparking in-person conflicts, real-world feelings?
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. I mean, when we use the word real, your phone is real, REEL, not REAL. And I think we have to have that conversation. To me, the issue is doing exactly what we're doing today, and is having the open dialogue. I do believe that students, and I think that's probably why I was on this group, is I get to work with a lot of young people, and I do believe they have the answers. These are the technology natives. They know no life without technology. Many of us have experienced life without technology. And so we need to look to them to help develop and inform those policies. The bottom line, though, is as we look, the way, and our panel up here talked about it in a couple of different points, is that it's learning to manage your own self, learning to regulate your own self, and then also, when we turn 16, we're not just given a car and say, here's the family Porsche, go out and have fun. There's driver's ed. So there's a process where we need to teach and give young people the opportunity to learn to make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes. That's how we learn, change, and grow as human beings. And so as we talked about, and I heard that was the other panel, was that we need to give opportunities and just an all-out restriction. I don't know if that's the best thing, because then how can young people learn to manage things themselves? So I think it has to be a combination, and I do think the young people have to be part of the solution.
I'm interested to hear from the three of you. When did you get your phone, your first phone? Under what circumstances, and what were the conversations you had at home about getting your phone and how you would use it?
I think I was 11 when I got my first cell phone. It was mainly for communication purposes with my parents.
It was a smartphone, just to
yeah. It was like a Samsung Galaxy something. It was really, it's old now, but it worked. I could make phone calls and whatnot. But yeah, we talked.
Did it flip? That's
no.
Okay.
It is. But
and it's not that old.
It's not that old. Okay, whatever. But no, it was mainly like my mom was like, be responsible with it. She told me like I had the safe search stuff on too. So like even if I tried or if I even stumbled upon something, it wouldn't show up. Google had, I don't know, a good feature like that. But I was told, be responsible, and it was taken away, and there was disciplinary actions if I was,
There were times where you did have it taken away by your parents.
Sure, like maybe if I was, I don't know, up too late on it. Like I was young. But yeah, my parents at least were very responsible with it.
Evan, when did you get your first phone? Under what circumstances, and what were the conversations you had with your parents?
I had a sort of basic phone that I mostly used to play games pretty infrequently when I was younger. I got my first proper phone after 6th grade when I was going away on a trip without my parents, and they wanted to be able to keep in contact with me. And that was a big distraction for me at first, and one of the chaperones on the trip was my teacher, and she helped me get used to, like, hey, you can't be on this all the time.
So like this big trip was your first time with your own phone, and you already kind of getting sucked into it, and your teacher kind of took you aside and counseled you a little bit.
Yeah.
And then what were the conversations you had after that with your parents, with your teachers?
The problem is that immediately after that, I had about 3/4 of a year of middle school, and then we had COVID.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't really much time for me to adjust to, like, this is how you use a phone before I was dropped into this environment of using it all the time.
And how do you think you dealt with that?
Well, I didn't deal with it very well. I used it all the time, and I had to really learn how to not be on my phone my freshman year of high school.
And how did you learn? I'm curious to know, like, what was your thought process? What was the maturation that occurred?
That's a really hard question to answer, right? Because it's been a while. But just being around people more was the big thing. Having that exposure to my peers, having teachers who cared and fellow students who cared and were like, hey, Evan, come on, pay attention to us.
And Avna, your experiences, when did you get your first phone? What was the conversation like at home, and what has been your experience with it?
I think I got my first phone in 6th grade, and it was my dad's old phone because he was getting a new one. And the reason I'd been asking for one for a while just because all of my friends and classmates had gotten one. So I felt like I was one of the later ones to get it, even though 6th grade is still pretty early in my opinion. But I don't know. In my head, I thought I was still kind of one of the last people to get one because all my friends already had them. So I think it was kind of like the peer pressure part of it that made me get a phone in the beginning. And then it was also for safety because I started hanging out with my friends like a little bit more, still like with parents, but not at home and stuff, so I would text my parents like where I was and what I was doing. And then I did get like TikTok, I think, I don't know, maybe a year after I had my phone, or like 6 months. And then that was actually a problem for me because I was on it a lot, because being that young and having a phone and just like unlimited access to social media, like I feel like it's kind of obvious that I'm gonna start being on it a little bit too much. So then me and my parents did talk about it, and I don't have it anymore, and I haven't had it since maybe 6.
You talk specifically with your parents about TikTok and
Yeah,
about
because
maybe
I was
you
just,
shouldn't have it. Yeah.
I was on my phone a lot, so we talked about the app specifically, and then decided that like I shouldn't have it. And honestly, I haven't really missed it, and I think it is pretty interesting because I don't have it right now, and like all my friends are always like wondering why I don't have it, but it's kind of better because I am a person who will be on my phone if I have access to stuff. So deleting the app honestly helps a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Tim, do you give families guidance about how early they should give kids their own phones? Do you talk to families and kids about that?
I think we do. We do a lot of talking with parents about that process, and in particular, like when we have parent support groups and things like that. But the idea is like a graduated process. So there's all kinds of different phones and technologies that you can use to work up to the total smartphone opportunity. But I think all of the things that the panel before us and these guys have shared are all the real concerns about, can we take this a stair-step opportunity to teach and to learn good tech habits and be able to have that balance within our lives. Because we're talking about, we're also talking about developing real, authentic human relationships. And the pandemic, we kind of lost some of that capability as human beings. And so we really need to focus on that as well, is that we have the relationships with our teachers. We have our relationships with our coaches, with our friends, with our neighbors. And having those actual relationships are going to be far more health-producing than those relationships via the phone or through apps.
Yeah, and a couple of the students have brought it up, but it could be that our anxiety over smartphones is tied up largely with anxiety over social media. The University of South Florida study that I mentioned at the top did also conclude that heavy social media use seemed to be associated with more mental health challenges. Students who posted more publicly also reported experiencing more depressive symptoms, higher anxiety, feelings of meaninglessness. They also reported getting less sleep than their peers who posted less or not at all. For the teens, and then I'll throw a question to Tim, do you post on social media publicly? Do you feel pressure to compare yourself on social media? You mentioned you deleted TikTok as an app, as one social media app, but seems like all three of you have drawn pretty healthy boundaries around your use on social media. Do you feel like posting on social media is harmful?
Well, during COVID-19, I was stuck at home because my mom was really concerned about me getting sick, and so that's when it really sucked me in. And I would play Call of Duty and I would post video game clips, but that didn't really affect me mentally. But just using it so much, I think I was really depressed and being inside so much, and I think it contributed to it, seeing all these people that were living, and I was stuck in my house. I don't want to say I compared myself to them, but I probably did subconsciously. And then after that experience and coming now, I've realized that this is a huge addiction, huge problem, and I've tried to cut back. But it's definitely possible to feel negatively about it.
Evan?
I've never been one for posting publicly on social media. I have friend groups, but they're basically the same as a text message group chat, right? I have a lot of anxiety around myself, and the idea of posting publicly is terrifying to me.
Do you have friends who do? Do you have conversations with your friends about what goes on social media?
I know that some of my friends are a lot more online than I am. I try not to, we don't really talk about those parts of their life because there are more important things to be talking about.
Avni, you already mentioned deleting TikTok, but do you post on social media? Do you find that it's either positive or negative?
Yeah, I have Instagram and Snapchat. I don't post on Snapchat just because I use it to talk to my friends, but I don't post anything. And then on Instagram, I do post every once in a while if I go on a trip or something like that. But I do think that even though I do post, that it's like a pretty negative environment just because you're seeing all of the unrealistic standards, which is like a pretty known thing, but it's actually very true. And just seeing so many different lives that you're not like living, and that is pretty harmful. So.
And how does that play out in school, in conversations with peers? Again, the comparison, I mean, do those things come up at school?
I mean, kind of. Like, we talk about concerts and, like, trips and what, like, this person's doing and what this person did over spring break. And, like, just kind of, like, talking about, like, oh, they went on this great trip or stuff like that. But, I mean, it's not, like, too bad, but it's definitely, like, present in, like, school conversations.
And Tim, with the Johnson County Mental Health Center, what is it about publicly posting on social media that could be driving some of the trends that I mentioned from the University of South Florida study?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's both. The bottom line is technology and social media. There are good aspects. I don't want to say that it's all bad, but it's about moderation. It's about understanding and learning how to use things appropriately. So, and understanding the finality of things. When you post something, it's out there, and it's out there permanently. Having conversations with young people about that, parents having conversations about that with their kids is super important. And the issues that exist at school, the issues still exist at home as well. We talked about sleep. I mean, that's probably one of the number one things that we talk to parents about is how much sleep young people are missing out on because of all the notifications and staying up late and staying up on social media, those kinds of things. So, and quite frankly, I think that's one of the bigger issues is that we see increase depression, increase anxiety, increase isolation. A lot of that has to do with we just have some really tired kids because they're on their phones late at night doing those things. And that's also where some research would suggest that the most mistakes are made. So when I talk with people, I say bedrooms, bathrooms are the two no-goes for personal cell phones, smartphones. Use them wherever you want to use them in your house, but bathrooms and bedrooms should be no-goes.
Well, I won't ask about bathrooms, but bedrooms, I know that's a kind of a common thing, a common fear that allowing use of phones in bed or in your bedroom before bedtime, that can keep you up late. You can scroll. What are your rules at home about having phones inside your bedroom or at bedtime?
Well, when I was younger, I definitely did have rules about no being on my phone past, I don't know, like 8, or bedtime was at 10, so I couldn't be on my phone like during that. But now, since I'm like getting a little bit older, I don't really have rules with my parents that we've set, but I am sometimes pretty bad about being on it at night just because I'm on FaceTime with my friends, or I'm texting them, or I'm just like scrolling or watching a show. So like that is something I'm kind of working on right now, but like I'm always like pretty tired, so I just like have to go to sleep. So lately I haven't really been on my phone that much at night because I've been doing like homework and other stuff like that, but a lot of times on weekends and stuff it's like a problem for me.
Evan and Asher, your rules at home about phones in bed, and just to be clear, you guys are both seniors, so you're almost out of here, but what have been the rules growing up?
The policy in my house was always no devices in bedrooms, period. So no TVs, no gaming consoles, no computers, none of that. I will admit to not following that rule all of the time.
You can say that now, right? You can say that now. You're like a month away from graduating. You can say that now.
I did not follow that rule all the time. There was a period where my parents tried to keep me from being on my phone in school by just shutting it down with the screen time settings, and that just encouraged me to be on it more at night. And I had to sort of train myself out of doing that because it was keeping me from getting good sleep. And that was a real problem for me, is that I was like starting to fall asleep in my classes.
Asher?
I did have a screen time limiter, so I never had any problems staying up late. But now that I'm unlocked, I will admit I am guilty of staying up really late, scrolling online. And I know it's a problem, and I know it's probably affecting my development, but it's definitely worth it, and I do it almost every night. But I don't sleep in class. I don't know, like, maybe I'm just different, but I can operate with that little amount of sleep, but I don't like doing it. I know it's a problem, and I know I should probably stop.
So it doesn't sound like there's rules though at your house. No, yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Now, my siblings, yes. My mom hounds them to go to bed, but like me, I'm kind of like, I don't know, like you said, I'm almost out of here. It's like, oh, I'm already done, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, I can do whatever, I guess.
What advice would you give to parents who are having these conversations with their own children at home? They might have younger kids who are just getting their first phone or about to get their first phone. What have you learned through your experience of getting a phone, now having it, kind of maybe going through some ups and downs? What advice would you give to parents about how they should approach giving their own children phones and how they should communicate that to their children?
I would just say be diplomatic about it. Like, work with them, because it was a lot more effective for me when I would get a little bit of screen time and then, okay, yeah, it's time to turn it off. Because being so like, you don't want to build resentment. And that didn't happen for me, and I'm very grateful that my parents were very lenient and nice about it. I got an Xbox and I could use it pretty much whenever I wanted, but I was told to do my work beforehand. So, I mean, it's just all about how you administer it, I think. Like, you can't let your kid run loose because he's going to learn that's okay, right? So,
Evan?
I'm a big proponent of don't ever start, kind of. Like, you don't give your kids iPads and game consoles when they're bored, when they're like 3. Don't give them access to devices at all. When their friends all get phones, say like, you don't need that. And I know that in some cases, your kids are going to be upset about that, and they're going to be like, but all of my friends have a phone. I need a phone so that I can stay in contact with them. And you just have to say no. You just have to say, like, you can text them on my phone if it's that important. Because I had friends whose parents did that, and I think it was really good for them.
Avni, your experience, what advice would you give?
Honestly, I would just like hold off as long as you can in the beginning, but then eventually you kind of have to have a phone because like that's like the norm now. And even though I got mine in 6th grade, which was pretty early, I like kind of like I didn't need it, but I did feel like I did, and like all my friends were confused why I didn't have one, so it kind of did set me apart, like not in a big way because it was at that age, but once you're like older, you kind of have to have a phone. So I think that, I don't know, I had screen time for a while. I think that worked, but it also made me like annoyed and kind of like angry because a lot of my friends didn't have it either, but a lot of them did too. So I don't really know what the exact solution is, but honestly, maybe holding off as long as you can and then implementing screen time and just having honest discussions with your kids about like why it's bad is helpful, because just like I feel like being honest and just telling them exactly like what the situation is and what the phones are doing to your brain at a young age, like maybe if they understand that younger, but I don't know, because it's like pretty hard because it just like keeps happening younger and younger, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get your thoughts on the big conversation we had earlier about phone bans in school, bell-to-bell policies. Well, I'll ask you about your thoughts on that. But Tim, this idea, I mean, these are digital natives. This is the world they live in. They're going to have to deal with technology. What Avni was just saying is, I mean, it's here, and there's really, I mean, we kind of ran the gamut of what they advise. You either be lenient or never give your kid a cell phone. Right. You know, but so there's going to be decisions that families are going to have to make, and so this is the world they're living in.
Right. I think the bottom line is to do exactly what I mean. They all said the same thing: is that have a discussion about it and be diplomatic. And so the one thing that I like to tell parents is, one, maintain your poker face. Don't be surprised. Don't overreact. When we react, we're emotionally based. What we need to do is respond to the situation, meaning that we need to be thoughtful and intentional about how and what we say, because we may learn things that we don't want to learn, but at least we're having that open, honest dialogue. At the end of the day, these two are going to go off to college, and they're going to hopefully be well prepared to handle all of those kinds of things and develop those coping strategies and those decision-making capacities. If they never were given those opportunities, never had those discussions, then it would be really hard for them to do that. So the mere fact that they've actually done some of that already with their parents on their own is a good sign. And I think that you know, that's what I would tell parents is just to have that open, honest dialogue, and this is where we're not as good as we could be as adults. We need a model. the good behavior, because it's really hard for us to tell our kids to put down the phones when we don't put our phones down. It's hard to tell our kids to pay attention when we snub someone for a phone interaction. So we have to demonstrate good, healthy tech habits, and then we have to have the conversations with them.
Take some audience questions. Leah's over here. If you have questions for any of these students, we have a couple that raise their hands. I do want to ask the students real quickly, from what you heard in the first panel, and again, caveat, 2 of you are seniors, you're going to be gone in about a month, but do you think a bell-to-bell policy where you can't have your phone, it's in a yonder bag or it's in a locker for the entire day, do you think that would be good? Would that be better than what you're experiencing right now?
Honestly, I don't know. So the cognitive capacity study that we were talking about earlier, I wrote an opinion on phones affecting focus for my newspaper, and I actually cited that study. So, I mean, it does kind of prove that if you have it away, not even in a phone caddy, away from the classroom, that your focus will be better and stuff. But I feel like, I don't know, because there has to be some sort of control that students still have, because then it just feels like it's the district against the students. So I feel like for it to be understanding and actually make the students still be happy with the district and not just resent going to school and hate the district, that it should be at least start as an easier policy. And I do think that, I mean, in my classes, a lot of my teachers aren't enforcing it as strictly, and then in some of them they are. So I think the classes that have been successful are the ones with the phone caddies, which was mentioned earlier. So I think using those methods and just seeing where it goes from there is a good way to see, because just having a big policy all at once just would seem like a lot, and it would just make a lot of students angry, but I feel like that's not the point of the policy.
Yeah. Evan and Asher, your thoughts on a bell-to-bell policy? Again, I know you're both seniors, but what would you say for the students that will come after you?
I think that bell-to-bell policies are especially not the best way to start. I think that if you're going to have a bell-to-bell policy, you need to have that culture in place first, that you don't need your phone. I think the Yonder pouches are quite silly. I have some friends at a school who use them, and they all figured out how to unlock them within 3 days, and we're back to using their phones in class. And that feels like a waste of a lot of money to me.
Asher.
Like you said, yeah, I'm going to be gone soon. But I think I don't see it being a thing. Well, okay, I think it's important. I think they're overdoing it. If you work with us, we'll work with you, is how I see it, because I don't think it needs to be a total beginning to end ban. I feel like lunchtime is acceptable. It's your free time. It's like the teachers have their phone during their lunch break. I feel like the students should too. And if it's going to ever work, they need to be either killer strict or not strict at all, because it's kind of neglected now. Beginning of the year, pound, don't have your phone out. Now, every class, somebody's got a phone, multiple people even, and the teacher doesn't do much about it. Nobody cares.
Oh, I think we did have an audience question. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a high school journalism teacher in Johnson County, one of the small 3. We don't have a district policy at all about this, but I'm sure they're watching the big ones to find out what's happening. My question for you guys, and by the way, thank you too for being in journalism, keeping us all informed at your school. We've been reading your articles, reading the Post. So one of the big reasons I talk to my kids about, hey, what would you do? What would you think if they were going to do the bell-to-bell policy? Any of the big 3 that they've done. What would be your thoughts of that? After the social media, after the music, it's always, well, I need to contact my parents if there's an emergency. They need to contact me, right? They need to tell me all the new things. They need to tell me. It's all about that's the third reason they don't want the phones put away, is that they feel like, especially in, God forbid, in the case of a really bad emergency, I need to be able to contact my parents. How do you guys feel about that? What would you say to that question for those students?
In my 4 years of high school and my other years of elementary and middle, I have not ever had a single, God forbid it doesn't happen, I've got a month left, but there's never been a horrible incident that I've needed to get a hold of them, and even if I try to get a hold of them, a lot of time I can't. So, but I feel like that's just a card students like to pull. But some students might have different needs, like diabetes. You need to see your blood sugar. But I don't know, maybe if they have an anxiety thing or if they're stressed out a lot and they just need connection. But me personally, I haven't had a big emergency like that since I can't even remember when.
Evan?
We recently had a weapons scare at my high school. There was a student who brought a gun to class, and the school found out about it, and they called a lockdown drill, which we later found out was not a drill, so that they could take the weapon from the student. My paper covered that. We had an article up about it the same day. But from what I heard, students did not use their phones to contact their parents. They used their phones to contact other students, and they used their phones to take video of the police coming into the building and of the student being taken out into the hallway and tackled so that they could get the weapon off him because he refused to give it up. And they used their phones to harass that student and to gossip about that student and to scare other students and tell tall tales. And I think that in emergencies, students should not have their phones. I think that that is a serious risk because it makes kids behave irrationally.
Another question from the audience?
I just want to acknowledge what all of the panel said. I think everything was great, but I just wanted to say like the side contrary to that. So I'm going into medicine at a top tier Ivy League school, and I just wanted to say that I think that having a phone is actually beneficial. It taught me how to be independent, and like I learned when not to use my phone by myself instead of having teachers control that. There was a study that was done during COVID that said the students that have like screen time and like parents that control everything, they're more likely to do bad things and use their phone more when they're allowed to. So I think that being allowed to use my phone, I've learned how to become independent and know when to use it or not. And adding on to that, I use it for a lot of good purposes as well. So I work out a lot, and then especially when I'm working out, like if I'm on the treadmill or anything like that, I'll use my phone to study. Or like during like passing periods and lunch, if I have a test later that day, I'll like study with my phone and do like flashcard reviews. So I just think that there's a lot of benefits that aren't being talked about instead of all the negatives, which is there, but it's just like life itself, you know? There's always gonna be positives and negatives with most things. If you can't learn the negatives and how to control that, the positives aren't going to matter at all.
Well, let me ask the panelists up here, the three students, how has your phone been good for you? What positives have you derived from it? How do you use it positively?
The same thing. Like in English, we always have these vocab tests every Friday. So like during passing period, I just go through flashcards like during every passing period before English, which is 7th hour. And I don't know. I think using it as a study tool is really important. And I think that honestly makes sense because in high school, we should be learning how to control it ourselves. I think that policies in middle school and elementary school, I feel like that's really important because you shouldn't even really be using a phone at that age. But I feel like in like the age group in high school, you have to start learning how to use your phone. So a complete ban wouldn't really allow you to like navigate that. But then in classes, I feel like it's about teacher respect too, because a lot of my teachers were like too scared of like policing phones constantly because like they didn't want to be the bad guy. But now they have something to fall back on, which I think is also the importance of the phone policy. It's like also for the students, but for the teachers as well.
Evan, something to add?
Like I've said, you need to build that culture of not wanting to use your phone. When I had a phone restriction during my school day, I just spent more time on it at night. I had to build those habits on my own. Just hard enforcing a phone policy, especially a very strict one, is going to make the students resistant, and there's going to be rebellion, and kids are going to find ways around it, and kids are going to do things like bring 2 phones to school and turn one in.
Another question here?
Well, so I think we can recognize that you three are not the average students. And that this gentleman over here going to Ivy League, congratulations, is not the average student. My concern is that, as with all things in life, that there's a bell curve here, you know, that there are students that don't need necessarily a lot of supervisioning. But then there are other students that, given the freedom to do whatever they want with their phone, the results are going to be pretty bad, and they're going to have to go deal with mental health people at the end of it. How do we handle this differentiation between the students who can be? You can't have different rules for different people, right? How do you handle that?
Asher?
That was a big thing that a lot of my friends, I myself, and the panel on our Principal Advisory Council last year discussed, because there's a bunch of students, like we've heard, that have straight A's, no homework, nothing that they need to do, and yet they're being subjected to the same restrictions. Like, you have nothing to do during your seminar hour, you can't use your phone. I don't know how we work around that, because there's like the environmental thing. Like, the kid that has work sees you on yours, and it's unfair. Like, so I feel like that's one of the biggest hurdles we have to jump over, because it isn't fair to the kids that do what's right, because then they still have to deal with the stuff that's in place for the kids that don't do
And Tim,
it.
in your experience, have you noticed trends among kids who are successful?
Yeah.
Like these three appear to have been about kind of knowing themselves and understanding their own habits of mind when using their phones?
Absolutely, and there's a process that people have you've learned over time. So I think the piece of that, and I think I said this earlier, is that it's not all bad. We're not talking about just negative. I'll be the first one to say we have implemented a social media storytelling campaign for young people to curb youth suicides. It's been effective. We use social media to do that so people could tell their stories. So there are absolutely good ways to utilize all of the technology that's available to us. We just have to realize that not all of it's good, and we have to have discussions about how that can impact each one of us. How we do it differently, I think, again, and I don't remember who was sitting in my seat before, but he said it started at home. I think it starts at home. And it starts at that conversation. We said we need to develop a culture. It's a culture of understanding how to develop good, healthy tech habits. So I want to focus on my mental health. I want to focus on my behavioral health, my mental health, my physical health, and my digital health. All three.
Time for maybe a couple more questions. I know there's one over here.
Yeah, I had a question about the shared responsibility between schools and parents and cell phone usage. And I want to stick specifically to cell phone usage and not general digital usage. Because it sounds like there's these bell-to-bell phone-free policies that we could be implementing in schools, which help teachers, help academics. But then at home, parents are dealing with this kind of in a whole nother way, with their students that are up too late and trying to teach cell phone usage in a different situation. And so what do you see being the shared responsibility between how schools should be managing phones and how parents should be managing phones? In my mind, those are two very different worlds where schools have phones coming in outside that are unregulated, that are unfiltered, that they're trying to manage, whereas at home, these are devices that parents have given their children.
Yeah, Tim, what is the balance and what is the difference between how families approach it and schools approach it, and how do they kind of work together?
Well, I don't know if, this is just my general perception from the parents that I talk to, but most phones that parents give their kids, and I'll speak for like my sister. I can remember when at Christmas, my nieces opened up their iPhones. It was like they opened up the world. There wasn't anything on them. It was open to the world. So, I think we're making some assumptions that when parents give a phone to their kid, that all of these things are on it or put on it, or they have created but young people are really quick about figuring out how to bypass that. I think I've heard the two stories that I've heard. Get two phones, a dummy phone and a real phone that you put in the caddy. Heard and seen that one, and then the other one about how to unlock the supposedly unlockable bag pretty quick. So again, there's going to be processes that we go by. You're absolutely right. It's two different scenarios, but there is commonality that can come together about setting the expectation. And I think it's about setting expectations at home and then holding youngsters to it. It's about setting expectations at school and holding them to it, just like when we're at home and we're at work as adults. It's learning to become an adult. It's learning to get into the workforce. It's learning all of those things that we're going to need to learn to be functioning adults in our society. So I think you're absolutely right. It is different. And sometimes the goal, it seems like there might be some not direct correlation, or there might not be agreement. But at the end of the day, I think it's about setting expectations and then holding people to those
We have
expectations.
time for one more question, but for the students, how do you see the difference between your phone device usage at school and your device phone usage at home? Is there a difference in your mind? Do you kind of turn it off and on, as Tim was kind of saying? What's the difference in your mind?
I really just use my phone at home for like daily quality of life stuff, music, maybe TikTok, I'll scroll. But like at school, I don't use it because it's a penalty now. And I understand the importance of doing my work. And so before we had the policy, I wouldn't use my phone until I could. But now that there's a penalty in place, it really pushes me to not use it.
Evan, thoughts to add?
Predominantly, my phone usage at school is like checking the news, checking to see if I have any texts from the people who I don't have. I have a thing on my phone that shuts it down during school that I set up for myself so that I only get texts from my parents and a couple of other important people and from my sports apps. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm getting very...
Well, I think the original question was, there's schools and families kind of working together in concert, trying to teach you good habits, monitor yourself. I mean, how do you feel that plays out in your life?
Right. So phone at school, predominantly like taking pictures of the board, news, parents. It's not anything... At home, it's more about free time, I guess. I see my phone at school more as a tool than as like a thing for fun.
Do you think most of your peers are like that?
No.
Yeah. But it's a good attitude to have. One final question here.
I just want to thank the students especially tonight. It's very courageous of you to come up here and tell your stories, and I really appreciate it. I like to say that I don't call this technology. I call it what it is, because this projector is technology, but we call it a projector. A hammer, we call a hammer, it's technology. Sounds crazy, but our phones contain digital media. And the word technology is a very broad term that has really served an industry very well. My question is that we talked a little bit about how the cultural norms have changed. It's not like when the smartphone came out that we knew it was going to become loaded with all of these things. It just evolved. The school districts never said, oh, this is going to be a good idea. Our kids are going to, nobody knew. Nobody knew. So now it's become a cultural norm for kids to have these things early, which, by the way, for any parents here that haven't given their kids a phone yet, my kids are now freshmen in high school. They have a very limited device. They're very outgoing. They're very good students. They have close friendships. And yes, it has taken a lot more effort for me as a parent that didn't give that early to make sure that those things are happening for them. So my question is about the cultural norms. I know the students said that, it's not fun for the school to say you can't do this, and there can be resistance. But what about later down the road when you guys are graduated from college and this cultural norm has changed back to no phones at school or during the between bells? Can you see how that could be a real positive?
Do you think it would be a positive first? I mean, you're still a sophomore, so you still have 2.5 more years, so that policies could change before you graduate, Avni. I think we kind of talked about this earlier, but yeah, do you think it could become, once it's in place longer, do you think the idea of having no phones at school or not having them out could become a norm that students kind of accept without it even being a question?
Honestly, yeah, I feel like that is kind of how it works, because in the beginning it's really difficult to deal with and it's just a shock, but then people will get used to it. I think that's almost positive that people will eventually over time start to get used to it. And I think honestly it will help overall focus and mental health. But I don't know, it's just still hard to combat at home and away from school. But I think that I mean, at least like doing what we can in schools, which is like what we can control. I think that is important, and I think it would develop into a norm, and people would definitely get used to it.
And again, Shawnee Mission only have it in place for a couple of months. Gardner Edgerton, I think, started at the beginning of the year, but from what I've heard both of you say, it sounds like, for the most part, students are starting to adopt that norm that the questioner was talking about, though also students do sometimes have them out too. But do you feel like it has become a norm at your school, that it will continue to be a norm after you leave?
I certainly hope so. You see it a lot with our incoming freshmen. They had a phone policy in the middle schools before they had one in the high schools. And so a lot of our incoming freshmen are less inclined to be on their phones because they'd built that habit already. And I think that cultural shift on a large level is what we need.
Asher?
It'll be like anything else. Yes, eventually after enough time, people will accept it. And they already have. I mean, our passing periods used to be 7 minutes. Now they're 5. It quickly got accepted. After COVID, they changed it to 7 for some reason. But they lived with 5 before. 7 was fun. We got accumulated to it. Back to 5, there's a little pushback, but they accepted it. And I feel like the biggest thing with the phone ban is without your phone, you can find yourself. You don't find purpose, you make your purpose. You join a club, be in a sport, because if you're involved, you're not worried about looking at your screen all the time.
Well, I want to thank these students, as well as Tim DeWeese and all of our panelists who came before. Give them a round of applause for coming up here tonight. And just a couple of announcements before we leave. It's a busy time of year, so we want to thank you for spending some time with us tonight, and also for our soon-to-be high school graduates. Congratulations, you've made it. A big round of applause for you. I also want to thank the folks at Johnson County Library for co-hosting this event, allowing us to use this space at Central Resource Library. We also plan again to host candidate forums this summer and fall, so they always help out. We always enjoy our collaborations with the library. Also, a big shout out to Lively KC for streaming this event. Sergey and Logan behind the cameras. This town hall in its entirety will be archived at the Post Facebook page for anyone who wants to watch who wasn't able to attend tonight in person. And I also want to thank the members of the Post staff who are also here tonight helping out: Leah Wonkum, Juliana Garcia, Kaylee McLaughlin, Lucy Chrisman, and Andrew Gogg. Again, check out the JohnsonCountyPost.com for the latest in Johnson County news and headlines. I'm Kyle Palmer. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and have a good night.